just settle down and start. To our Honorable Minister of Home Affairs and former Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Mzwaledi, esteemed guests, I'm not sure if I should even call you guests because you are part of UKZN and part of this building. Professors Salim and Quraish Abdul Karim and Professor Girish Modi, colleagues, alumni and friends. It's my great honor to welcome all of you to our 5th Alumni Living Legends Awards ceremony, which is the brainchild of Professor Dlova. I think this idea came during COVID. When there was COVID and so many of the health workers died, and we were attending all these funerals and memorial services, and we were having all these obituaries read out, and it dawned on her, and I was present at that time, that really, why are we waiting for people to pass away before we honor them? And for most of you, you've been honored all over, but I think it's still it's still very precious to be honored by your own. You know, this is your academic home. It can never compare to all the awards and everything that you've received out there. But sometimes to be appreciated at home, appreciated in your own academic institution, it really does give you the feeling that, yes, everybody recognizes me, even the people that I work hard to uphold the name of out there, because we know you are all upholding the name of this institution and the name of the country. So this afternoon, we are really excited to inform you of the latest developments at UKZN. The 10-year strategic plan was launched, which is the 2023-2032. I will still be calling upon you, as we said, for the research plan, which is still being consulted upon. The main purpose of the plan is to reposition the university as an international research-intensive university of higher learning, contributing to practical approaches to changes facing humankind at every level. In order to achieve this, the plan consists of 5 strategic goals, which will address immediate challenges and societal needs, but also pursue our core purpose, which is to inspire greatness in every aspect of our mandate. In terms of this, the key strategic goals, the university will require committed and knowledgeable staff who will assist the university with high levels of integrity. Inculcated in all that we do is the focus to ensure that we are excellent in teaching and learning, as well as in research. We also want to produce the knowledge, skills, and networks to build meaningful and agile careers that can be sustained and adapted over the course of our lifetime. In this regard, we must ensure also excellent student experience, something that has been really, we have been falling short of in this university, the student experience. We know that a lot of it, of course, comes from the protests and everything, but we are committed to creating a better environment, and I'm happy to report that since 2017, at least in this college, we haven't had a violent protest, which is good. It did come with a lot of sacrifice. People were jailed, but we got the results. So UKZN is a global player, and as such, internationalization is very key to our existence. Our world rankings indicate that we are still entrenched in the top 3%, and these are exciting times for our institutions. I take this opportunity to invite you as our alumni and friends to join us as we enter this new phase at UKZN, where together we shall reposition our institution for continued global competitiveness and sustainability. I also bring to you greetings and acknowledgements from the Vice-Chancellor. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here. I was also rushing from Senate, but he really brings his greetings. I was also saying to the Dean, we probably need a bigger stage. You can't bring all these esteemed alumni. We probably need to think about this in future. It's still baby steps. As we grow, we probably need a bigger stage, a bigger audience, and a bigger everything. A fun way of keeping in touch and celebrating UKZN medical fraternity. Our ongoing Proudly Medical School Alumnus social media campaign is being flighted every Friday morning on their Facebook and Twitter. The campaign profiles our local and internationally based alumni, highlighting the significant strides they've made over the years and adding a line or two about their fondest memories at the medical school. We also have all the young students here, the young medical students, interns, and doctors in the community service. We have quite a whole lot of young people who are here to learn from your wisdom and make those important networks. With these short words, I would like to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Mama, for that wonderful welcome, and welcome to everyone here. It's really, I just don't know what to say here. We have these amazing leaders, these amazing scientists, these amazing community workers and role models sitting right here in front of us. And again, as Prof. Ngama mentioned, it has always been a dream that why are we not acknowledging our own people? Why should they get numerous awards internationally and we're not doing anything about them? Even though we don't get international awards, why are we not recognizing talent? Why are we not showcasing what we have so that our youth here can actually learn from them and aspire to be even better than them? I don't know if you can beat these two, but you can strive for that. So if you are a medical student, can you raise your hand? Yes. So we've got here first-year medical students, second-year medical students, third-year medical students, fourth-year, fifth-year, and final-year medical students on purpose. We decided that we're going to fill this room with a youth that have energy, that have vision, so that they can be inspired by those who have made great strides in health. I also want to acknowledge one of the medical students. You listened to the beautiful piano that was playing when you came in here. He's a final year student, Mr. Play. And we have to look for talent. It is not only about medicine, it is about unleashing the talent within our medical students. I have a great artist here. I miss them. There he is. Can you stand up? Yes, Lutando. Lutando is an artist who ran a workshop for us in the medical school. Everybody was equal there. There was no professor or consultant or head of department. We were all equal. And he guided us. It was such an amazing, wonderful, relaxing afternoon. Take a seat, Lutando. And he has actually exhibited in the UK, in London. So what am I saying? I am saying beyond academia, beyond the lectures, there's so much more within our students. There's so much more talent that we need to nurture and unleash it. And as Prof. Ngama mentioned, in the last 5 years of our leadership, I have to blow my trumpet a bit. We haven't really had riots. Why? Because we listen to the students. Most of the time, we don't listen to students. And then they have tantrums because we only respond when they have tantrums. I'm not endorsing all that behavior, which you know. But I must say today, I met with the new SRC, amazing group of young people who were so respectful in the way they conducted themselves. So thank you so much to you. So colleagues, without further ado, I am going to hand over to our MC, Nongcebo Mackenzie, who is our radio personality and an MC. And as Prof. Ngama has introduced our astounding colleagues, I'm happy for you guys to have here. We want to hear, we want to learn. Share with us what makes you tick, what makes you so cool, what makes you to have all these awards that you have, what makes you want to reach out and teach all the nurses in rheumatology about rheumatology. And to our Minister of Health, he was president of MSRC when we were medical students. And again, the commitment to his work, to health, getting peanuts while some people have got mansions and driving big cars, and the fact that he still goes to a public hospital despite being in the position that he is. We are inspired by your leadership and more than anything, your humility. So thank you, and over to you, Nongcebo.
Thank you very much, Professor Dlova, for the warm welcome and for the introductions. And thank you very much to everyone who's here today. Just to let you know that if you have got any friends or anyone who isn't here and isn't able to attend, this is being streamed live on the Facebook page. So please, you can just drop them a message, a quick WhatsApp, and let them know that they can join in, and they can even submit any questions. We will have a Q&A, so they can join in that way using the Facebook page. And you can also revisit this interview. These sessions are always amazing. There's always so much to learn, so many pearls of wisdom that are dropped. So you can always revisit the interview and take a listen. I'm going to come straight to you, Professor Salim Abdul Karim. We refer to the world now as pre-COVID and post-COVID. And you were essentially the face of COVID. We were listening every week to hear about, I'm not sure if that's a good thing to be the face of, but you were the face of COVID because we were listening to your updates. We were listening to your global updates about what was happening in South Africa, in the world. came with a lot of pressure, it came with a lot of scrutiny, it came with a lot that was just surrounding the world at that time, and the fear, and you had to be this confident, knowledgeable scientist in the face of it all and be the one delivering a lot of bad news, and you did it.
Yes, it was a particularly challenging time. So let me say that the key to being somebody who does community education is my mic on.
I'm trying to check actually.
I have a loud voice, so even without the mic, you'll be able to hear me. No, it's working. I can hear it. Thanks. So I think what's critically important when you are educating the public and trying to convey complex information is to know your subject really well. Those who know their subject really well are able to explain things very simply. The less you know, the more complicated you make it, because you don't know what you can leave out. But the moment you know your subject well, you can focus on the critical messages. Now, it used to be that before I go on television, I had a practice run. And that practice run was with the National Coronavirus Command Council, where my classmate, Dr. Motswaledi, and Dr. Pandor and all of the others, all of the ministers were present. And I would tell them the latest information and where things were going. And you know, I would get about 60, 70 questions from all the ministers. I would write down every question as they gave me the questions, and then I would respond at the end of it all. So it was a good experience for me because they continually challenged me and they helped me understand where I was not being clear with them. And I figured that if I can't explain it to politicians, how will I be able to explain it to anyone else? So that, for me, was an important part of the process. But once I went on television, I learned that the most important thing was to be spontaneous and to speak to your audience. So that's why I never asked the questions beforehand. In fact, I don't want to know the questions beforehand. I prefer to get the questions live. I prefer just to speak to you. And when I speak on television, that's the idea behind it.
Thank you. May I ask, how has life been for you post-COVID?
So unfortunately, not yet post-COVID, but we are living in COVID now in a situation where things are very much under control. So now my role, I'm no longer involved in the South African Advisory Committee because I now am appointed as Special Advisor on Pandemics to the Director General of the WHO. So now my job is to advise the whole world on how to prepare for the next pandemic. So one of my jobs is to go to Geneva repeatedly, and I spend a lot of time now in the Berlin hub. There's a WHO pandemic preparedness hub based in Berlin, which I go to regularly. I'm working as part of that team. We're developing a whole lot of exciting things, early warning systems, preparing surveillance mechanisms, genetics. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. So it's exciting.
But as Professor Ngama said, and as Professor Dlovo said, you belong to us. Professor Modi, you are credited with contributing to the, and I'm quoting here, the recognition of a wide spectrum of rheumatic diseases in Africa and playing an important role in raising awareness and promoting rheumatology education and training in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and the African continent. Why is this kind of advocacy important? Is it still as important as it was then?
Thank you, Nonkebo. Firstly, the era in which I joined, I started work in rheumatology in 1980. At that stage, rheumatology was sort of one of the Cinderella disciplines. It was not well recognized, not well developed, and they were... You can hear it?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. And at the time, there were only about 7 rheumatologists in South Africa. And So when I joined rheumatology, when you looked at the literature, there was very little known about various rheumatic diseases in Africa and in particularly the African black population. For instance, let me give you an example. One of the first studies that I did was looking at King Edward Hospital over a 5-year period from 1977 to 1981. Now I won't ask you where you were in those days, but it was a 5-year period, and King Edward Hospital in those days was a 2,000-bed hospital. And in that 5-year period, we saw 19 African black patients with gout. 19 over a 5-year period in a 2,000-bed hospital. However, 10 years later, when we went and did that study, there were over 100 patients in a similar period. And today, I think a big group practice will probably have that number of patients with gout over there. So clearly at this stage, very little was known about the rheumatic diseases. Systemic lupus erythematosus. Every time as a registrar we saw a patient with systemic lupus erythematosus, an African patient, it would be presented at a problem round or a grand round. I think in the last 15 years, we've probably seen close to 1,000 patients with systemic lupus amongst all the multi-ethnic populations at Albert Luturi. So in that era, there was very little known about rheumatic diseases. So that was one. Secondly, there was, William Osler is credited, I think all of us know William Osler, is credited with saying, when a patient with arthritis comes through the front door, I want to leave through the back door. And I think that, in a sense, indicated the challenges that patients faced in terms of availability of medication to improve quality of life. So in that era, there was very little interest in promoting rheumatology. So I joined the service run by Dr. P.D. Naidu in 1980, and the same year I went to a conference in Pretoria, and there were some dynamic speakers from the UK and the USA, and I was attracted to pursue that discipline. So the first part of your question, in terms of research, very little was known at the time, and a considerable amount has. Secondly, with respect to advocacy. Now, if you think about it, if the medical profession is not exposed to the rheumatic diseases to any great extent, what about the poor patients? Who is going to educate the patients? Who's going to empower the patients? Who's going to fight for the rights of patients? I used to always, in my public comments, make a remark that if you were sitting or driving a vehicle on a busy road and an ambulance went past with the sirens blazing, one thing you can be sure, that patient in the ambulance is not suffering from acute arthritis, isn't it? And that's the reason why rheumatic diseases were neglected. If it was a heart attack, you say heart failure, stroke, you'd rush. But with rheumatic disease, you suffer, sometimes you wish you were dead, but unfortunately, it was a neglected discipline. Even to this day, there were only two chairs in rheumatology in South Africa, UCT and UKZN, and both of these are endowed chairs as well. So there was a need, and what we embarked on is we held public health meetings in UKZN, in the Albert Luturi Hospital. We also have had public awareness meetings in hospitals like Msileni, Shlabisa, Center Polnaris, Potchefstroom, and I've also taken part in multidisciplinary meetings in various parts of the country, in 5 of the provinces in South Africa. So there clearly has been a need to raise this. And today, you've heard about COVID. I think if Professor Karim will remember or know that this cytokine storm that they talk about with COVID, the closest analogy to that was the patients with acute inflammatory arthritis. And the same drugs that we're using to treat patients with arthritis were being tried on patients with COVID as well. So there you are. It's amazing. So today, considerable progress has been made. When you see a patient a young person comes walking into a consulting room with crutches or sitting on a wheelchair, and then a few weeks later, the patient can smile and go out and go back to school or go back to work. it's really a heartwarming experience. So I think that over the decades, considerable progress has been made. And I think the students of the future will ensure that this progress goes to even greater heights. We set up a program in UKZN, and we've trained about 14 rheumatologists now in this province. Mm-hmm. And I've also contributed to the training of about 20 different rheumatologists on the African continent. We've had people from Ethiopia who came and spent 2 years with us and returned to Ethiopia about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. 120 million people with 2 rheumatologists trained in UKZN. Mm-hmm. And this sponsorship of these fellows was by an NGO from North America called Rheumatology of All, for All, of which I'm a member.
Thank you for your contribution, because as you talk about this, you're talking about it almost as an outsider of it, and you're describing what has happened. But the reason we are here with you today is because you've been a critical part of that, and that's why you've been honored on this evening. Professor Qureisha Abdul Karim, I'm always intrigued. One of our guests last time was from Umzindo, now Umziwabantu, tiny, teeny little town. You are from Otongati, and you are now a world-renowned scientist. You're co-founder of Caprisa. And a lot of people who are from small towns don't think there's a way to get recognized. And they think this is, a lot of them have no hope that they will ever be recognized for their talent, for their acumen, and yet here you are as an example of that. How did you do it? Because some people just don't know what the first step to take is.
You pre-warned us. We have an hour here, and we have to be brief with our responses. So I'm going to try and give you a very long story very quickly. So the first is here. I think when you grow up in a small town, you can either be defined by it, or you can define where you go. And for me, the inspiration came from 3 sources. One was a community who put a very high value in education. As some of you may be aware, Tongaat is where the biggest sugar mill is. So all of the sugarcane plantations and all the indigenous workers who came out to work on the sugarcane plantations and a few merchants really valued education. And they used their money to set up schools. So people who earned very little every month would take £1 of that small salary, and that was used to hire teachers. That was used to build schools in this area. We had about 4 primary schools, 1 high school. And my parents were also very committed. So every parent who contributed to that fund to hire teachers and to build the schools, every one of us grew up with this ethic and ethos that education is everything. And so as a learner in these schools, I had to put a lot of time and effort, and I felt it was fitting to do that and to do the best that I can, given all the sacrifices the entire community was making to ensure that we had a good education. And I have to say that when I set out to do the best, I knew I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to pursue science that would make a difference to people's lives. That I didn't do that thinking I'd get recognition. And awards and recognition was the last thing on my mind. The main thing that continues to drive me is that we face many challenges. And what is that challenge that one can contribute to that can improve the lives of others? It's been a very long and slow journey. That was a bit of a surprise. I think when you imbibe the outputs of a knowledge generation process, whether it's medical advances or other advances that we have technologically, we don't always appreciate how much of failure goes into that. How many times you have to keep dusting yourself, picking yourself up and trying again and learning each time you fail to how do you do better. And that in addressing complex challenges that face us, you really can't, there's no shortcut out of this. Slim spoke about, when you're addressing the public, you have to have a very granular knowledge and understanding of what you're doing in order to do that. And that comes from synthesizing and assimilating a lot. So it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of fortitude and resilience that's needed, but not to give up, because you have to keep moving. So I have to go back to my mentors, I have to go back to my community and all the people who have opened doors for me over the years, and that's what keeps me going.
It's interesting, one wouldn't think that somebody at your level, and let me put this in context. You have been awarded the Order of Mapungubwe in South Africa, bronze, and I'll read the categories. Platinum is for exceptional and unique, gold is for exceptional, silver is for excellent, bronze is for outstanding. And you have a mentor, you just said now. You are the co-founder and associate scientific director of CAPRISA, which is the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa. You're a professor of clinical epidemiology in Columbia University, New York, and you're a pro-vice chancellor for African health at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. And you have a mentor, and you consult. That goes to show the importance of not walking any path alone. And I think a lot of people here, a lot of students here, think you only need a mentor when you're young. You only need guidance when you're young. And you mentioned something so important. When I say young, as in young in the field, I mean young in terms of experience. And you mentioned something important, the amount of failure that goes into success. And I think that's something that we always forget. We think, oh, she's achieved this, she's written this paper, she's published this, and there's this, and there's that. And we think it just, it all builds upon each other magically. And I think it's important because that's what breaks a lot of people, that they failed this time. Yeah.
So you're right. You don't, we, at CAPRISA, we mentor a lot of medical students, from first year all the way through. And my first question to the medical students usually is, so why do you want to do research? And 9 out of 10 times the response is, I want to be on TV, I want to get an award. And I say, well, I started doing my HIV research more than 34 years ago. And in addition to that, I'd previously done work in beta thalassemia for a good 5 years. So if you want to be on TV and you want to get awards, you don't start here. It's a long journey and it's a hard journey. But you should be here because you feel passionate about research. You should be here because you want to make a difference. And that research is about imagination. It's about imagining a future and then saying, what will we need in the future? What will we need in 5 to 10 years from now? So when I ask this question today, some people may think I'm a bit crazy asking the question, but if you have good imagination, you read, you know the topic and so on, and you can anticipate, you're able to ask that question that's still going to be relevant in a decade from now when the answer is actually needed. And so I think that the issue is about a commitment, and there are many, many opportunities that we have in KwaZulu-Natal. There are many opportunities we have in South Africa and Africa. And that we know from the legends like Prof. Modi and others in our midst, there's the whole wall there of people who've made extraordinary contributions to improving people's lives in so many different disciplines. We're very, very privileged and fortunate to have those legends that we read their textbooks, even if some of them are not with us today, that they were able to make game-changing differences. They were able to contribute to the world. I can't tell you how many times I go to different parts of the world and people would ask me, do I know Professor X or Professor Y? Because their textbooks have really helped them manage and change. So this is a wonderful and inspiring institution. There are many challenges that are unique to KZN that can still impact the world. So look for those opportunities. Find the one that really excites you. And you can see just from around this little group, we all have very different interests. And then just pursue it. And don't expect, I know for an instant gratification generation, it's not going to be quick, but you will make a difference, and that's what counts.
Thank you. Dr. Motsoaledi, you are currently the Minister of Home Affairs, and we're going to come to that. We're going to come to Home Affairs. You were appointed Minister of Health, so this is your previous position in 2009. You developed the policy and the legislative framework for the National Health Insurance, and we discussed that with Dr. Phahla. He was here in July. You also led the transformation of South Africa's policy on HIV/AIDS, which led to the expansion of the country's antiretroviral program. At that time, why were these for you areas that needed attention?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a long story. Are you prepared to listen? Very intriguing. Look, I'm sure we are all aware of the turmoil that we went through with HIV and AIDS.
Yes.
And there are some people who were bruised here. My classmate over there, they were bruised during that period because it was war. I arrived in that situation, I must tell you, just because of that. Immediately after I was appointed, a week after I was appointed, for the first time in my life, I want to have massage. Honestly, I've never known that these things are important until I was appointed Minister of Health. And the issue of HIV came to the fore, and the battles that were there. During the midst of that battle,
Sorry, Minister.
the United Nations had a General Assembly, which happens in September every year. Both President Zuma, who was the president then, and his deputy, Kgalema Motlanthe, couldn't go. They asked me to go and represent South Africa. When I arrived there, I was told that there's a gentleman who's looking for me all over the place. His name is Michel Sidibe. He was the executive director of UNAIDS. These are people who hold the position of Under-Secretary of State. In other words, they fall just a level below the Secretary General of United Nations. They said he's looking for me. So we sat down, and he said, look, I'm sending you to our leaders, because I've been sent by leaders from the African continent. Leaders say, you guys in South Africa, you are messing up a big way, because they believe this continent will get out of HIV and AIDS if South Africa wakes up. And they believe you are not only asleep, you are messing up. He was very direct. Now, I knew a little bit of what was happening, even though I was not in health. So I asked him, but there are countries that have done and are still doing very well. One of them is Botswana. Botswana, at that time, they were giving ARVs and everybody was praising them. Uganda has also just started. I said, why don't you go there and let them lead this fight, because they are already ahead? And he looked at me and said, but do you understand international politics? I got embarrassed, because when you are a medical student here, especially a president of the SRC, you believe you understand the whole world politics. Now here I'm being questioned. And I said, yeah, no, I do. He said, do you know the status of these countries you are mentioning about on the world stage? It's only South Africa on the world stage, especially on the African stage, that will be listened to. So you guys wake up and tell your leaders to do so. Of course, I came home to tell them. And they said, but you, the Minister of Health, and you, the doctor, show us what to do in order to get out of this. Now, one of the intervening things, I don't know whether Professor Karim remembers it. I got out of my office one day. I met him and the late Professor Jerry Kovadia, our mentor who just died a few weeks back. I met him, and I don't know whether I told him this, but I'm going to tell him today. They look like they've seen a ghost, both of them. And I said, Prof, what's going on? They've just finalized research in which they were participating. I still remember you, Professor Karim, and Professor Jerry Kovadia, and the late Professor Bongani Majosi. Yes. And there were about 4 of you. Yes. They were going to present the results to the Department of Health, because they were going to release them internationally. and they were told that this is propaganda against the government. This is nonsense. That's why they look like they saw a ghost. So I called them in my office and I looked. And it gave me an idea. I then sat down, got the graphs they showed me, their research. I got graphs from the World Organization, UNAIDS, South African Medical Research Council. There was no CAPRISA then, yes. I think so, there was no CAPRISA. But I got from all these bodies, I developed graphs, figures, numbers. And I can tell you, even me, they scared me. What they produce when you put them together. In other words, it's like you are taking parts, different parts which don't seem to relate, you know, from to form an animal. And they look like it's very small, but when you put them together, it's a huge elephant. That's what happened when I put those things together. Then I phoned the president. I said, look, I want to see you. I've got something to present to you. He said, I'll call you this evening. I'm very busy. We're in Cape Town. 11:30 at night, he had not yet called me. So I got into my pajamas. I went to sleep. 15 minutes later, he phoned me. He said, come now. I'm ready for you. And when I arrived, he said, you see what type of time is it in the night? I'm giving you only 15 minutes to say what you wanted to tell me. I said, okay. I never spoke for 15 minutes. I was presenting those graphs, putting them on the table. And believe you me, it took an hour of those and he was dead quiet. When I finished, he said, look, is this true? Because you are aware that deputy presidents in South Africa are chairpersons of SANAC, South African National AIDS Council. And he has been a deputy president. He said, but I sat in SANAC, I sat all over. I never saw these things. Where were they? I said, no, they are around. They were hiding in books somewhere. He said, why were we not told this? I said, well, look, here it is. Then he said, tomorrow, I want you to present to all your colleagues because this is scary. Now, when he said tomorrow, it was going to be what you call an extended cabinet. That's a cabinet that is held 2 weeks in October before the MTBS budget. You know, this budget that is read by the Minister of Finance in October. We prepare for it 2 weeks before. They show the figures and what it's going to say. I said, but this is about money. Nobody will be ready to listen to this. And anyway, he said, they are going to listen. So when we finished, it was 3 o'clock. The Minister of Finance was Trevor Manuel at that time. And you know, he produced this big graph from the world. IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, what. They are very boring, believe you me. You fall asleep. And he was producing them until 3. When everybody is tired, they want to stand up. He said, no, the Minister of Health has got something to tell you. And there was an explosion of discontent. And some were in 2 minutes, you know. And he said, sit down, Kalani Panzi, and listen. So I took the stage. And of course, I never took that 10 minutes. And when I finished, you could hear a pin fall. It was dead quiet. Because some were saying, but is this true? I said, of course it's true. This is science. Some were saying, look, what were we drawing this budget for? Because most of what it was showing there was the devastation that AIDS was causing to women and children, pregnant women and children in this country. They were dying like flies. And just to add flavor, I made sure that next to those figures and graphs, I put graves, you know, on the, yes, there were some graves there, just yours. So then there was a big issue, how? So this is the real picture. What we've been hearing about AIDS denialism and all that is nonsense. Of course it is. So they said, how are we going to take it out? Of course, the president was going to annually address NCOP. That's where the things came out. And thereafter, it was World AIDS Day on the 1st of December. And he said, now, from what you have presented, from what you have shown us, we need to change, and you must tell us how to change it. Fortunately, luckily, Michel Sidibe, I phoned him back and said, what you have asked me, I've been able to do, and the president is going to announce something on World AIDS Day. He said, no, I'm leaving Geneva, I'm coming to South Africa. And he did come. That night, the person who prepares the speech for the president phoned me and said, the president is saying, I've prepared the speech. He said, the area where you must talk about HIV/AIDS, I'm leaving it to you. Write anything you want there. It has never been a privilege I've experienced before. So I sat with Michelle. They gave us the computer, actually, where the speech was written. And we added whatever we wanted. Pregnant women, this and that. People with CD4 count, this and that. And I remember we were at the Pretoria showgrounds when where we celebrated World AIDS Day. I saw some ministers, especially women ministers. I saw them shedding tears after that announcement. They cried emotionally. And that's when we turned the clock, because then he just called the Minister of Finance then, was Minister Bravin Gordon. He told me, Minister, how much you want? I said, according to my calculation. Remember, what year was it? I said, it's 3,000 rand. He called Bravin and said, give this man 3,000 rand. Change whatever you have got in the budget. And I was given that 3,000 rand.
3,000 rand per? 3,000 rand per?
3 billion.
Per person.
Oh, did I say 3,000?
3 billion. 3 billion.
Maybe you are intimidating me. You are intimidating me. It was 3 billion rand.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, well, it's 3,000 rand per person.
I saw
for the
everybody
medication.
shocked looking at me. I don't know where that come from. It was 3 billion. We need 3 billion rand. And remember, compare 3 billion now with 2009. Yes, it was money. He said, Minister of Finance, give this man 3 billion rand. We must now start moving out of this. And that's why we did. And in 2012, when we introduced the one tablet, yes, it actually turned the situation over, because in terms of compliance, remember HIV/AIDS people there were taking 9 tablets a day, three times a day. Now they were taking 1. The level of compliance showed up, and I think, I'm not sure whether it has caused some bit of heartache too, because people are no longer scared of AIDS. It's just like a flu now. Because lots of people are now on this, they're living with it, they can survive with it. But that's the long history of what happened with HIV and AIDS.
Of how you turned the corner.
Yes.
So that's quite interesting, Professor Karim, because personally I'm of the view that messages about HIV and AIDS aren't as loud as they used to be. When I was in high school, this is the height of it all. There were billboards, there were messages on radio, on TV, newspapers, everything, just, you know, the basics. Abstain, be faithful, condomize, all those messages, from the very basic messages to the high level graphs and the graves and all of that. Now, what Minister is saying is quite interesting, because it does seem like there's no more fear. What we hear about behavior, and you know, you add the contexts about society and all of that, and poverty and all the other dynamics that fuel certain kinds of behaviors, it creates the impression that people are not scared. Now, from obviously the work that you do at Caprisa is not about determining whether people are scared or not. It's much more advanced than that. But obviously you would then get a sense of people's attitudes and their behaviors. What's the picture?
Well, before I start with what the picture is, I'm going to give you a short editorial note on Dr. Motsoleri's recounting, because I remember it very clearly that Professor Kuvadia, Professor Mayosi and myself went to brief a few people in government about the Lancet series. We've worked on this document, and we basically produced a state-of-the-art or account of the state of health in South Africa. And we used a term in our discussion with Dr. Motsoleri when we met with him. We told him, and he called us in this document, and we referred to this thing as the quadruple burden of disease. And we talked about mental health, we talked about child health and maternal child, we talked about infectious diseases, chronic diseases, injuries. And we said, this is the quadruple burden of disease. And to see 2 days later he's on television and he's talking about the quadruple burden of disease. And I mean, just the way science was converted in that way, and how he took scientific information and then made it the basis of how they were going to act, I think was quite important. And it just shows the value of what we teach our students here. We don't teach them rote. We teach them to become lifelong learners. And then we teach them the importance of science and learning new information and absorbing it. And that's a critical part of what we do. And so it takes me into answering your question, which is that all epidemics and pandemics will come and go. There is no such thing as a perpetual pandemic. Pandemics rise, they reach a plateau where the number of infections occur is high, and then they come down. In COVID, what we learned is that it's a rapid fire of multiple waves of pandemics because the virus kept changing. We went from alpha to beta to gamma to delta to Omicron, and as the virus changed, we saw a new pandemic occur, and we are still in the Omicron pandemic as it stands. In HIV, what we've had is a very long pandemic. We saw its rise, we saw it reach its peak, and now we have seen it coming down. But unlike the usual pandemic, where it comes down quite rapidly, as we see with flu, as we see with a measles epidemic, or as we see with most like Ebola, the cases occur, gets to a peak, comes down quickly. It's what we call a bell-shaped curve. In HIV, the downside of the bell is a very long, drawn-out decline. And so HIV has been declining now for about almost 18 years. But the decline is very slow, and it's almost imperceptible. And because HIV is no longer that kind of threat that it used to be, where graveyards were being filled up with patients with HIV, it's got a new perspective. Just like how, if I had to ask you about COVID in April 2020, and I asked you about COVID in April 2023, your response is completely different.
Yeah.
In April 2020, you will say, oh, I don't want to go anywhere near those people because they have COVID. I'm going to die if I get it. Now you don't think about it like that. COVID is just something we live with. And HIV has become that. It's become something we live with. We can deal with it. People now live a normal life with it. That doesn't mean to say the threat is gone. Because if you think about it, we had 1.3 million new infections last year in the world, and we had about 700,000 deaths. And if you take just South Africa, we had more deaths from HIV last year in 2022 than we had from COVID-19. And it's something you don't even think about, but it's true that the number of deaths from HIV still is in our top 3 conditions for deaths, the causes of deaths in our country.
This leaves me with the impression that people are more scared of an end result. So they're more scared of death. So people were more scared of COVID because you would die. And now that you can live a normal life and you're not taking 9 pills a day, you're just taking one once a day. And the process of getting those, the public health systems that have been put in place, those drop boxes, it's become much easier to get the medication. It creates the impression that people are no longer scared because you can live that much longer. So you will raise your children, you will be able to exercise, you will be able to have a fulfilling long career, you will be able to have your baby, you can protect yourself if you've been exposed. And this question might sound a bit counterintuitive. Those positive messages, are they not having a negative result in terms of how we behave and how we interact and how we treat the pandemic, that is HIV and AIDS?
Yeah, they say, we are victims of our success. That's how they refer to it in HIV. But we have to be very practical here. Every one of us is going to die.
Thank you, Professor.
We don't know when, and we don't spend our days thinking, oh, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. We think about living, because we put that side of it aside, and we think about the good things in life. And I think that's what's happening in COVID, that people don't want to talk about COVID. I can't even have a discussion about COVID now because people just don't want to hear. They don't want to listen, they don't want to deal with it.
People don't even want to see a mask anymore.
Yeah, it's out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. It's the same with HIV now. Now HIV is a situation that we've brought on. People even believe mistakenly that it's over, when it's actually anything but over. Our job is to ensure that we do the best we can to prevent new infections and prevent deaths. And that means putting patients on treatment, keeping them on treatment, keeping them alive.
Professor Modi, when you look at your work, when you look back, you were recounting, some of the strides that have been made. And that is what we have been able to see. But you know the hard work that's gone into it. You know the little moments, the little successes just after the massive failure, but the little success that makes the big success. When you look back over your very illustrative career, what are you most proud of?
Thank you. Firstly, I just want to make one comment on what Croatia had said about Africa and the medical school. I've had the privilege of joining this medical school as a medical student in 1968 and then retiring in 2021, having spent 2 years in Cape Town doing my rheumatology training. And next year, our group would be commemorating our 50th anniversary. So it's been a long journey, and in support of what Croatia is saying, while it's important and useful to go out to the world and acquire knowledge, there's a lot that we can achieve locally for the benefit of our communities as well as our institution. Now, with respect to reflecting on what one achieves, the question is multi-pronged. I mean, if we had to say to ourselves that we clearly have we've had successes on multiple fronts. Firstly, is that there's a greater awareness and education and empowerment of not only the community, but also with health professionals. So that clearly the message that we would want to send out is that with diseases, rheumatic diseases are now eminently treatable. And unfortunately, even to this day, I'm not in the hospital at present, but every month we would still see 2 or 3 patients being brought to us on a wheelchair or a stretcher, not having received any treatment. Now that is criminal, like with HIV, in the sense that you can make a diagnosis and you do have effective treatments available, even in the public sector. So the message that one wants to preach is to ensure that we can get to these patients at an earlier stage. Secondly, with respect to students and with education, that's important. I mean, unlike in the years gone by, today access to information is so much easier. I remember the days, and probably Prof. Karim will remember as well, when you see a patient in the ward and you're using a drug, or the patient with the disease has some unusual skin manifestation, and you say, does this occur in this condition? We would leave the ward, N5 or D ward, you'd walk to the medical school, go to the library, right? And after half an hour, 45 minutes, you now learn that this manifestation can occur with that disease. What do we do now? Take your phone out, and within 30 seconds, we wasted hours and hours in the day trying to source information. So clearly the current generation is blessed in that way. And on the research front, Prof. Karim is telling you as well, we used to take A4 pages and join the A4 pages, and we used to do our spreadsheets. And we used to do cut and paste. Do you remember the cut and paste? You get a secretary to type one of the pages in your thesis, you cut the top half of the page, then you make some more notes, you cut the bottom half, and you paste them together. I mean, that's the era and that's the time. So acquiring knowledge and implementing this knowledge is much easier. We've made considerable progress. And clearly, people like us would be disappointed if we look 10 or 20 years ahead, and if the current generation is only doing what we're doing, we'd be disappointed because we have so much more tools available to them. And so that's why we are seeing the scientific progress that we are making. So in my own discipline, as I said, there's a considerable amount of progress that's being made, and we find that we can offer patients much more than we could in the years gone by.
And what are you personally, about your achievements, most proud of? What has been your highlight of your career?
From the perspective of the patient, it's some highlight that you never get tired of, as I said. Seeing a patient who is disabled, who's ill, who's unable to perform normally, and then a week or two later, seeing that patient better, trying to even run around and do things, is something that we see on a regular basis, and it's something you never get tired of. You look at the joy and the expression on that face. Secondly, on the perspective, on a professional level, as I've mentioned to you about us assisting countries. You know, I have statements from my colleagues in Nigeria and from Ethiopia. And one of the things that they say is that in Nigeria, when the history of medicine is written in Nigeria, the Department of Rheumatology at UKZN would feature there because it contributed to the training of almost the first 15 of the rheumatologists to serve their population. The current number is close to 50, the population of 220 million people. Similarly, the colleague from Ethiopia says that you've trained the only 2 rheumatologists in that country with 100 million people. And on a personal, lastly, on a personal level, like has been mentioned by my colleagues, when you set out on a career of advocacy, trying to empower patients and to serve, and also educate and train people, the last thing that you are looking for is an award or a certificate. That's the last thing on your mind. So in 2015, I certainly was honored by my peers in the American College of Rheumatology as being the first rheumatologist from Africa to be chosen as a master of the American College of Rheumatology. So that's clearly something that is gratifying, but it's not something that you work for. All it did is inspire to want to continue to work harder and to give even more.
Well done.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Professor Karim, I mentioned, and I think that's like 0.05% of your credentials that I mentioned. But what you said is it comes from what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, from your imagination, and you make it come to life. Now, as a scientist, you will go, you will present your findings, your work will be interrogated, your work will be torn apart, and you'll have to justify it and defend it. How do you survive that scrutiny? How do you work so hard, fail so hard, win so hard, and then after saying, Eureka, I've done it, and then it's torn apart, and then you've got to reassemble it and still go forward with that same belief and that same energy and that same excitement about your work, because it's personal. It's your work. When you succeed, it will have your name under it. But to the scrutiny that it comes with?
So I think in COVID, one of the challenges we had was it was something new we were experiencing. And I think we were all experts about the same level at the same time. And the thing that the public had a lot of challenge and difficulty with was when you said something on Thursday that by Sunday had changed. And so if you did an interview on Thursday and then you did an interview on Sunday, you would say 2 different things. Now in science, uncertainty, debate, deliberations are very much part of it. In fact, it is what makes our science better and stronger. And this is something you have to do better in terms of communicating. But that's, when you find something, you want people to scrutinize it. You want them to turn it over, and for you, what you're finding, to hold still steadfast and strong. Now, that's one part of it. But there's also another part where we've seen There's a bit of competition, sometimes internally in the country, sometimes externally. And we've been taken to task many times in like the pages of Nature and so on. And some of it has been just plain jealousy. Sometimes it's like, oh, we want to get to the goal post first and so on. So you have to firstly have a very thick skin and take the criticism and sift out what's noise and what's really substantive. And in science, we have a very strong review process. So if you submit to a journal, it goes to a peer review process. You get a lot of criticisms back. And I always say to the young students, you know what, it really, your ego takes a big hit, but then cry a river, build a bridge, and get over it. So it is hard, but you have to build a thick skin. You also have to sift out and take what are important lessons and take those lessons and see what is it that's going to make your science better. And for me, it's a iterative process. And the more criticism you get, the stronger it makes you, because you have to do better science and constantly strive to do better. And I feel very strongly about that, because I think sometimes in developing countries, we think we can do second-rate research, and that the people we serve don't deserve the best. And it makes us even more committed to ensuring that what we do has to be the best. And that's one of the reasons why we look for what are the best journals out there. So you know, when you publish in the best journals, it's respected by everybody, that knowledge has an impact beyond national or local impact and can have that. So I just say, it's part of making you better. So don't keel over, but sift out and don't take it personally. Try and find the kernels of wisdom there and hang on to it and see how what you're doing can be better. So keep an open mind, listen to your critiques, your criticizers, and don't get overwhelmed by it, because the worst that can happen is you just feel, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, and give up. No, there's no room for giving up. Just like stick with it and keep going.
We've got 10 minutes left, and we will give the Minister 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And then open the floor up to questions. I did promise we would come back to Home Affairs. Right. Now, I think we can agree, Minister, that Home Affairs at an experience level, I'm not saying at a policy level, I'm not saying at an experience everyday level, to get your passport, to get your child's birth certificate, it is plagued with challenges, right? From an experience level. Now, you have been on a mission to turn things around at various levels. In the Home Affairs Department Budget Vote 2023-2024, which you presented in May, you presented some matters that you'll be focusing on, and I'll just sample 2. Easing of congestion at the Department of Home Affairs offices. Render services such as issuing and printing of birth certificates, IDs, passports, death certificates, related services, especially in remote rural areas. And this for me really, really troubles me. A friend of mine, their father passed away, and the father lived in Ladyfrey, and I think the closest town with a Home Affairs is Queenstown. There's load shedding, there's skeleton staff, some of the escalations that need to happen can't happen immediately, and they needed a death certificate. And it became a long, drawn-out process. Now add load shedding to that, and this has got nothing to do with Home Affairs, but add load shedding to that, and they need to get the body in the ground, because load shedding is 4 hours. A cycle of load shedding is 4 hours, and they have 2 cycles of it, so the bodies decompose quicker, and they can't bury because they're waiting for the death certificate. These are the real lived experiences, and this is something that happened 2 weeks ago. And you have been really on a path to turn things around and make Department of Health services accessible, and you emphasize this, to the most remote rural areas. And the other matter that you tackled, you say, in the same Home Affairs Department budget vote, you made some announcements as regard the matter of border control. And I emphasize bold italics underline illegal immigrants, right? And I extrapolate the below. The Minister of Finance has officially granted Department of Home Affairs permission to issue requests for proposals to start a massive redevelopment project of the 6 busiest ports of entry in the form of huge infrastructural development and technology injection, and this will cover from Beit Bridge down to Kopfontein, right? Now, the questions here are 2. From the perspective of the experience of people going to Home Affairs, from the experience, and remember when we look at this in context, right? We look at the person had to drive from Queenstown to Ladyfrey twice in one day. Now, they had a car because they'd driven down from Joburg. If you're from Ladyfrey, you don't have a car. You can't afford the taxi fare to go up and down twice a day, every day for 3 days to get the death certificate. So when you say turning this around, in terms of the lived experience of people, what is your vision? What is your vision for that? And when we come to, again, managing the matter, bold italics underline, illegal immigrants. And remember, this is not just a border control matter. It's a job matter. It's a finance matter. It's a housing and accommodation matter. It spills over into so many other sectors. And in 3 minutes, Minister.
And I bought my card.
Yeah, you want me to be a miracle maker? Yeah.
You've done it before with it.
Yeah, look, there is a lot of, I'm not sure what term to use because I don't want to say exaggeration, because let me tell you, if Home Affairs was not working, this country will grind to a halt immediately. Because unlike other departments, and I'm not saying they are less important, all the 62 million people need Home Affairs at one stage or the other. When you are born, you need Home Affairs. When you go to school, you need some document from Home Affairs. When you come to university, when you go to open a bank account, when you apply for SASSA, when you get married, even when you die, the announcement must happen through Home Affairs. So it's used by all and sundry. And that's why anything that goes wrong get multiplied 10 times. For instance, we are able to issue, and we have done so in the past year, 800,000 birth certificates in the first 30 days of life of a child. That's our policy. There are 1.2 million babies born every year, but 800,000 of them within 30 days of life, we are able to issue them with that birth certificate. We issue 3 million smart cards per annum. And of course, then there are passports and all these things. Now, when it comes to death certificate, it also depends on the training. There's no way a person should not be buried because Home Affairs have got load shedding and all that. When it comes to burial, we are able to issue a manual death certificate. Then you will come later when everything is done and settled for us to give you a real automated one. So this story about somebody not being buried and all that is about training. Now, one of the dreams, which unfortunately are not yet coming true because of financial situation of the country, is that when you look at nurses, you look at teachers, you look at social workers, I'll just give you a few examples, police, even the soldiers, they are all serving community in one way or the other. And all of them went for training for that specific job. Social worker went for training, a teacher, a nurse. There's no school of Home Affairs in South Africa. Yet, yes, there's no school of home. We just take anybody who have got any degree because we are taking people from university now. But they know nothing about exactly the work they have to do. And that's why we are having this problem. One of my dreams was to establish a school of Home Affairs where you are not allowed to work unless you come from that school. And I'm going to get one of the universities to take that up. Because that's what universities are there for. I've already spoken to one of the universities. Of course, it can't be a medical school. It can't be. It's about governance. But let me tell you the things we're doing. In order to be, when it comes to registering people, especially newborns. The number one country on this continent is Egypt. They are 98% registered, because people talk about undocumented, and every time the word undocumented, they think about somebody from another country. They think about foreign nationals, undocumented. No, it's not like that. Egypt is 98% undocumented, which means 2% of Egyptians themselves are not documented. Number 2 is South Africa. We are 89% documented, which means 11% of South Africans still don't have any document whatsoever. And that's 6 million people. The most famous one is Thabo Bester. You are aware that we only documented them recently. Yes, so people don't know that. So why there are many countries on the continent which are still 5%.
Sorry.
Some are 0. So
Sorry, Minister, and I ask this genuinely, why was it important to still document him?
to still what?
To still document Thabo Bester. Why was it still important to document him?
Do you want to have a thug who is not known around in the midst?
So even though he's now part of another system, he still needs to have this now.
No person must go undocumented.
Oh, okay.
It's in your country. It's very dangerous.
Is it? Okay.
Do you want? Because if Bester was documented, some of the things he has been able to achieve, he wouldn't have been able to achieve.
Because then he couldn't be traced, and that's
Yes, he couldn't be traced. He was living anonymously and doing all sorts of things and having, so you have to, at any rate, the Identification Act says, the moment you know that somebody is not documented, it's a criminal offense against us in the department not to do so.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are number 2. Why is Egypt number 1? Because they started the work of established Home Affairs offices in hospitals. We started in 2020, and a few weeks down the line, COVID struck. We had to stop. We are doing it now. There are 4,000 hospitals and clinics in the country. Birth is taking place in 1,440 of them. And we want all of them to have Home Affairs, where birth is taking place. And we've already started that process. There are quite a number of... And when we put up a Home Affairs office in a hospital, we put it opposite the labor ward. That's what we ask for. If it's somewhere because they failed to give us an office opposite the labor ward, we want the lady to see, because understand the culture of our people. Some of the young girls don't get documented. They tell you straight, I came here in labor. I don't know the name of the child. I'm still going to consult relatives. This child must be named after somebody. And they disappear. And they come after 5 years when the child is supposed to go to school. That's the problem that we're faced with, because, but we are doing that. The second thing we are doing, we're opening Home Affairs offices in malls. There's a lot of space there, and I can tell you, you won't see those queues. We've already started with Menlyn Mall. The third thing, I've realized the things you are saying. You mentioned you say Queenstown? And, because they are mobile offices. I mean, they are static offices. There are 412 offices in the country. South Africa is supposed to be highly developed, but you won't believe it. Only half of those offices are modernized because of broadband. As you are sitting here doing research and, don't think in rural areas there is such a thing. Broadband is still a problem in the country. So because of that, we decided we must now deliver Home Affairs offices on trucks. Throughout the years, Home Affairs will have 100 trucks at any one time. But on the 15th of December, I'm receiving 100 more trucks. And we'll keep on receiving them until there are 1,000. Because some of them want to park them at schools. No school kid. One of the things that pays me is to see a young girl wearing gym dresses and, tunics and all this during school hours, queuing at Home Affairs. We don't want to see that anymore. But we also have our good moments. I was still telling the professor here, because he complained about the Umgeni Road, which is one of our west offices. We're going to abolish it one day. About the passport, that one we've won, man. We are able to produce a passport in 5 days, maximum 13 days. If it comes to a push, should I disclose this information?
Please.
If it comes to a push, we can give you a passport within 24 hours. That one we've achieved, and we do so. But the reason that I don't want to publicize it is because I've realized that important people don't renew their passport. They always expire. And they come last minute. Hey, Minister, I'm going to a funeral now. I must cross the border. And I just discovered at the airport that my passport most of you here, if you check your passport, if you have them, they will have expired until you go for the next visit. So we have been able to achieve that, and we are trying our best, and I can assure you, good days are coming. Mark the space. Thank you.
So we're going to open the floor for questions. We have exactly 5 minutes left, so if you could just stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question to the relevant panelist.
Sure. I want to start off by actually thanking this panel for the wonderful discussion. I also want to take this opportunity that on behalf of the students to thank the medical school and the dean for this invitation to include our students and the young professionals here. So thank you for that. Okay, so my name is Mohammed Hussein. I'm a 5th year medical student at UKZN. I actually had 4 questions, but in the interest of time, I will only ask 2. And the first one will be to Professors Abdul Karim. In terms of the pandemic accord, which is now a new theme when it comes to global health, in your work in pandemic preparedness, do you think the pandemic accord will meet its objective? Or do you think already that politics have infiltrated that space and it won't be as effective? Because we know the pandemic accord will be adopted at the World Health Assembly in Geneva in 2024. And the second question to the Minister, how do we link politics to the student young professionals who are here? And I ask this in light of the fact, how can we engage directly with politicians, even at the local level? 2 weeks ago, I was invited to Oman in the Middle East to do a presentation on the state of ultrasound in South Africa from a student's perspective. My efforts to reach the HOD and the Department of Health at the KZN office, they were unsuccessful because I wanted to brief them on my presentation. I wanted to seek their counsel. What advice would you give to the student young professionals who are here? We as politicians want to listen to A, B, C, D from you as youth. What advice would you give? Thank you so much.
I'll ask Professor to respond first.
Sure, I can deal with that quite well. So you're quite right that the whole world's next response to a pandemic is going to be driven by the pandemic accord, because we understand that when you're dealing with a pandemic, we can't deal with it piecemeal. You can't have one solution, one country, different solution, other country, and especially when we saw things like vaccines become available, that they were only available to countries that were wealthy and not available to countries in Africa, for example. So the pandemic accord was agreed, and all countries agreed at the UN General Assembly to create a pandemic treaty, which all countries were intended to sign and agree to, so it becomes a guiding document for how we'll respond in the future. The process is quite a complicated process. It's co-chaired by a South African, interestingly, and the ex-Director General of the Department of Health. And this process is a give-and-take negotiation going on in Geneva on an ongoing basis. So far, it has not gone well. If anything, it's gone in the wrong direction. So the zero draft that was produced made some terrific recommendations about vaccine access to diagnostics, to therapeutics, basically saying something to the effect that any country that produces vaccines has to commit that half of the vaccines they make will be given to a central pool like the ACT accelerator of the WHO for global distribution. So if, let's say, the US makes 1 million vaccines, 500,000 they keep, other half is then distributed. So that countries that make it benefit, but also the whole world benefits. That clause didn't survive even 1 week. They got rid of it. So all clauses about sharing IP, all clauses about equitable distribution of vaccines, all have come out of the pandemic accord. My only hope is that in the current negotiations that those will be brought back, even if it's differently, but there's some attempt to achieve equity in the global accord. So like you, and I know you've been involved in some of these discussions, I'm hoping that countries will gather some sense and some commitment and compassion to put back into the pandemic accord the clauses around equity.
Thank you, Professor. Minister, the response to the young man about accessibility and what you would like to hear from young people?
Yeah, I think he's starting the question at the end. Yes, because it depends on the people you wanted to talk to, the way they were brought up. I won't do that in my department. I do listen to people. And that's why it's important for you not to find a distinction between medicine and politics. You must be able to integrate them. And I want to tell you a story. You didn't ask me that question, but I think it's important. I came in here, Prof. Modi came in 1968, I came in 1979. Yes. And when I arrived, I was from the University of the North, Tarfluop, which is now University of Limpopo. I did my pre-med there. It was just after 1976. There was war all over. And I regarded all whites as enemies because we were fighting with them. I mean, people like, I still remember a guy called Johnson who stood up in a mathematics class and said, look, there's nothing I can do. Blacks are genetically engineered not to understand mathematics. So you're all going to fail and it's not my fault. You have got to fight. Now, when I arrived here at medical school, it was very different. Nelson Mandela was still in jail. So an organization called Release Mandela campaign started, and they were going to launch it here. And I know this is a war against whites. And I was very enthusiastic, you know. But now I see one of the speakers is Professor Theodore Sakin. He's a dean of medical school, and he's white. And he's going to tell us about releasing Mandela. What I knew about Mandela was that he's in jail with my uncle. Remember, my uncle was one in the Rivonia trial, and I never met him at that time. And we speak in hushed tones, hiding, when we speak about him. And here is this white man who's a dean of a medical school. They deal with medicine. What the hell does he have to do with Mandela? So I was curious, and I went to attend that launch. And Professor Sakin stood up. He said, look, I'm a professor of medicine. I know a lot about medicine. But here at King Rad, the 8th hospital, when I get into the ward, it's so full. I have to kneel down and take some of the patients below the bed in order to examine them. And many of them are not sick. They are just hungry. They've got kwashiorkor. And my professorship won't help in any way in resolving that. Then he said, when I go out the road, remember, this separation between black and white was very distinct. When I go to Addington Hospital, which is white, he said, I found mostly elderly people there who are coming in because they've got knee problems and they want their nails trimmed and all that. And there's a lot of space, but I can't take those people in Kirat sleeping under beds and put them on the beds in Addington. The system doesn't allow that. So he said, how does my professorship help? I want Nelson Mandela to go out so that we start afresh. We reset this whole system because it's not working. Doesn't matter how much medicine you know. And that encouraged me to know, oh, my politics and being a medical student are closely related. If you come from that, you won't ignore medical students when they want to come and give a report to you. I told you about how Prof and them turned gray on the face. They were going to report to Directors General about this report is talking about the quadruple burden of disease, and they were told it's propaganda. But immediately when I met them, I knew that I have to listen to them. You understand what I mean? They had no appointment with me. I opened my office, I say, come in. Maybe it's because of our upbringing here. Because I said, how can somebody say Professor Karim is spreading propaganda? Maybe it's because I knew him personally. You know, this research is talking about, he started it in 4th year. I don't know whether he remembers. He started the research when he was a 4th year medical student. We're all doing that, but it was not important to us. And he came to present, I still remember it was about diabetes, in the medical student conference, which we hold annually. So I knew this is a world-class researcher. And I knew Professor Kovadia because he was our mentor. You understand what I mean? So you have got to get involved. Many of you here are not involved. You are going to hold public office next time. You are going to do the same thing, believe you me, disregarding people. So it's the manner in which we have been brought up. And there are times when I ask myself, Professor Glover, if I didn't go to Natal Medical School, during our time it was still called Natal Medical School, so allow me to use the old term. If I didn't come here, will I have been what I am today? Will my understanding of life have been what it is today? My view of life? And the answer, I think, is a big no. So don't undermine being here at the University of Natal. I don't want to undermine others, but I can assure you, South Africa had 5 ministers of health since democracy, and 4 of them come from here. Yes, 4 of them, among all the medical schools in the country, they come from here. That tells a lot. Thank you.
Any other questions? Nomakwesia's got the microphone. So we'll take that as the last question for the evening.
Good evening. My name is Mary Mohammed. I'm a 4th year medical student. My question is for Professor Modi. So just out of curiosity for myself and my fellow medical students, what are your thoughts regarding the state of the recognition and the treatment of fibromyalgia by medical professionals? Because up until just recently, fibromyalgia was viewed by many doctors as a waste paper basket term or a disease with no defined pathophysiology. So has that, in your opinion, changed at all recently? Thank you.
Thanks. I would have preferred answering a question about clinical benefits for students, but nevertheless, this is a disease-specific question. The question of fibromyalgia, you know, there was an editorial in the leading rheumatology journal, Arthritis and Rheumatism, saying, fibromyalgia, the scourge of human mankind or the source of the rheumatologist's existence. So in other words, encountering patients who have diffuse aches and pains. This is fibromyalgia is defined as a condition where patients have diffuse aches and pains on the upper half of the body, lower half, right half, left half, etc. And often the problem has been that when we look at these patients on clinical examination, secondly, when you do the routine laboratory tests or imaging studies, there are no discernible abnormalities. And patients will complain of symptoms of numbness, but when you examine them, the sensation is intact. Similarly, they complain of weakness, and you find that the muscle power on objective testing is normal. However, the question of, because it's aches and pains and it falls within the realms of rheumatology, most patients are seen and managed by rheumatologists. What has been recognized over the last, in fact, it's more than a decade, so it's not, is that if one has a normal person and one does what we call MRI imaging, where you can actually have measurement of pain-sensitive responses to pain-sensitive endings. If you take a normal person and you apply pressure on the skin or in certain parts of the body, what will happen is that you find that when you look at the MRI of the brain, the certain parts of the brain will light up. However, in patients with fibromyalgia, what has been known is that there's an exaggerated response on brain MRI imaging in these patients. So yes, the answer is clearly there are advances in our understanding of fibromyalgia. However, with respect to management of these patients, there are various different modalities are used. People talk about group therapy, pain therapy, different coping strategies for pain. And when it comes to the use of drugs, it involves the use of antidepressants as well as anticonvulsant medications. So it's certainly one of the most difficult conditions to treat. And certainly for a rheumatologist like me, having a patient who comes in with multiple swollen joints, who's hobbling, and you put them on medication and 2 weeks later they're running, with fibromyalgia it's not quite as simple. So the answer to your question is this something that we've left over for your generation to research and resolve. So, with respect to the student, I just want to make one comment with respect to the students. One of the joys for me, having been a clinician and a teacher, I just want to share one experience with you. All of you're students and doctors, young doctors over here, and the one experience I want to share is that, when we see a third-year student and the student has got a stethoscope and he puts it onto the heart, or he takes his hand and puts it onto an abdomen, waiting to feel an enlarged organ, right? One of the joys of being a clinician and teacher is you're looking at a student who's very anxious, he's very apprehensive. And suddenly, when he puts the stethoscope there and he hears the murmur, or he puts his hand and he can feel that enlarged spleen touch the tip of his finger, you watch that expression, that anxiety and apprehension now turns into a glow and a smile. My God, it's been a delight to see that hundreds of times over the years. So thank you very much for keeping us happy and stimulated.
Thank you, Professor Moody. And with that, I hand over to Professor Dlova and Professor Ngqa.
I think it's... any more questions?
Oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies.
Okay, I think it's Dr. Kenison Lita. Is it? Or do I head over the floor? Oh, okay. So it's been an amazing evening, colleagues, and we know how busy you are. So we're so grateful.
Professor.
Yeah. So I was saying it's been an amazing evening. We're so grateful that you made time to be with us and share your amazing journeys, inspire us. Us South Africans are the best. We've got the best scientists here. We've got the best clinicians. We've got the best leaders. So not at any stage should you ever undermine yourselves. You can do it. You are worth it. And you have what it takes. It doesn't matter where you come from. It's not how you end, it's not how you begin, but how you end. You've seen it. Small town of Tongaat. I come from a small village as well in the Eastern Cape, and most of us here. So we are really glad to have you guys here. So thank you. So I'm going to hand this over to each and every one of you. Where's the pictures? I'll start with, let's start this way and go that way. Start with Dr. Mtswaledi. Okay. So, Dr. Mtswaledi, this is for you. And with this, we want to thank you for all the contributions that you have made to UKZN, to South Africa, to our country and everybody. And we appreciate your leadership, and we appreciate who you are. We love you, and we are saying we have started this living legends to say we don't want to hear all these amazing things about you, when you are right there in that casket, but hear your worthiness, be validated by your alumni. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anybody taking a photo?
Oh, okay. Let's take this. Yeah.
Yes. I want a special one.
You want a special one?
Yes.
Because those will come late, hey? And thanks to your family, too, if they are here or watching, for the support that they have given you, the commitment and the sacrifices you have made to be where you are. So Dr. Mzwaledi mentioned the amalgamation or intersection between health and politics. And if you do get there at some stage, be the great leader who listens, who takes calls, and takes advice from everybody else. Thanks, Dr. Mzwaledi.
Thank you.
Prof. Modi, this is for you. Again, as our ex-teacher, our professor, our leader, our father, we are so grateful to have you. You are our professor emeritus. You are one of the most, one of our favorite teachers and professors. Never intimidated us, always treated us with kids' gloves, never shouted at us. You've been a great role model as a teacher, and we hope to emulate you. Humility, calm voice, always engaging, and the work you have done in Africa. You know, in South Africa, we may say we are at a better level than the rest of the African countries. So you went out there and said, you spread your wings and taught and developed rheumatologists in the rest of Africa. We love you for that, and we appreciate what you have done. Wow, 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 wow. The rose amongst the thorns, yeah. So, Croatia, I don't know what to say. You know, I went to your department upstairs here many times, and the awards that I've seen there, and each time your husband says, I only have 20% of these, 80% of them are Croatia's. I have never, ever seen such a humble human being. Humility is your other name. I have never, ever seen such a dedicated, motivated individual. You are an inspiration to all of us. You have shown us that it is possible. It doesn't matter where you come from. Your passion, even when I went to take the deans last week and I spoke to Abdul, he told me you are in the wards. That is enormous commitment. What a power couple. What a power couple. I have never seen it. It's the first. So continue to inspire us, continue to support us, continue to motivate us, and continue to be a role model for us and all the young ones who are sitting there watching you. And we are so proud of you, and we love you. Yes. So I leave our TV star for the last. So you heard, it's not about being famous on TV, it's the content. So thank you so much again to you, Abdul, for the work that you have done with your wife and the support you have given to your wife as well. You know, many times there's competition between couples, and you find that the husband, you know, there's this and that, but you've been rising together, supporting each other. That's actually it's a good example for us. We also appreciate the support we're giving the medical school, and you continue to do, nurturing our medical students, our postgrads, and I know there's many more things that we've spoken about, always willing to assist, taking my calls anytime. So we still look up to you and continue to shine, continue to represent us as South Africa, and we are so proud of you. You are the best couple, and thank you so much for all that you have done. Who's Ronnie? Okay, Ronnie, where's Ronnie? Is he here? Ronnie Pillay, yes, you. So, Ronnie, beautiful smile all the time. I've been requested to give this to you from RMS. Always helpful. These events would not have been possible without him, and the security that we have to provide for our ministers that are coming here. Ronnie is responsible for that. Anytime you call him, always available, goes an extra mile. Thank you so much. This is from the Dean's office. And we appreciate that. And this is for you. So, right. So thank you, colleagues. And what? Group photo with the pictures. Okay. Oh, okay. Ah. Oh, no.
Thank you so much. It has been amazing. I know you didn't want to take the deanship. It was at such a crucial stage in the history of this medical school where there was that vacuum and with all the problems that were there. No one wanted to take the plunge, and you raised your hand. And I really want to thank you. You came in, you stabilized the medical school. I think, as I've said, that we haven't had a strike since 2017. Yes, there's a lot of work that still needs to happen. We need to grow, we need to expand, but you really got the medical schools stabilized. And thank you for also initiating this alumni event. This is just to appreciate you and your work. Thank you.
Nayo ke le frame kade ibuza ukuthi yaba yizona.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. I don't think I deserve this. So I'll tell you yesterday I saw So I was, I'm always checking. I'm like, OCD, everything is, well and all of that. So I said, where are the pictures for tomorrow? So I went to check, everything is fine, everything is done. And then I see Bato carrying this one, quickly going to Kwez's office. I'm like, what's that? And then said, no, it's one of the photos for yesterday. I'm like, okay. Then said, no, this is mine. Like it's hers. So I went to Kwezi. I said, Kwezi, please make sure she didn't use university funds. What is that for? Why is she having an extra picture in frame? Little did I know that it's meant for me. Oh, I am so... thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I didn't expect this. It was not about me, but thank you so much. I feel validated. Thank you so much for this.
Nice
so
to meet you.
before we close, we'll take
nice
a picture.
To meet you, and before
and
we
then
keep
we
it
will
up.
allow Dr. Amlita to say something. Shall we take... Oh, I must sit here. Oh, okay.
You want standing? Okay.
It's the shoes. I promise you, it's the shoes.
Maybe that must happen. It's going to be difficult. Can you Korea? Okay, fine. Thank you. I'll take this one.
Yes. Oh, okay. Good evening to everyone, and special greetings to the guests. Some of the guests are my teachers, but I will start with Prof. Karim, the male. He's got a very good memory. When we met outside, he still remembers me during COVID. I always got goosebumps when I see this professor on TV because COVID evolved, and when you see him on TV, we knew that we need to change our approach in KwaZulu-Natal since we were dealing with the COVID approach. And it was a lot of work. But Prof, your unwavering leadership is noted, and we are very proud of you. Prof. Karim, the lady, she still remains a phenomenal woman. There's not a lot to say because of time. Prof. Modi, he still looks the same. Maybe the young doctors must consider specializing in rheumatology. I think there's an anti-aging drug in rheumatology. He is an emblem of peace. I still remember him when he was a dean. Approachable, very humble. Minister is an epitome of brave. And I'll make this submission, Minister. And Professor Ngamo can bear witness that I said the same thing during our Senate meeting today to say, how do we ensure a succession plan that is palpable, a succession plan that is structured, in a sense that when the year starts, after 6 months, there's a review that Prof. Karim creates 10 Prof. Karims from these young people. I think, in my view, that's a legacy of an immortal. And to you, Minister, I may sound unpopular, but it's a view that I hold, to say we are experiencing an unemployment in this country, but in the administration, I want to be specific, in the administration of this country, we've got many 65-year-olds and above, yet young people are educated with expertise. Maybe an unpopular decision must be taken in this country to say, give them their package, retire peacefully, having done the same succession plan that is structured that I talked about, so that they leave behind their twins, but young people have work to do. Convocation is a structure that represents graduates. When you finish your school, you meet with Dr. Mlita as your president. As devoted alumni of UKZN, we bear the responsibility to align ourselves with the university's visionary plan. We assess the visionary plan, we critique the visionary plan, but finally harmoniously align ourselves with that particular visionary plan as the ambassadors of the university. That's our role, because I know convocation sometimes is confusing. It's just the structure of the alumni. But the submission that we've made on top of what I was submitting to the minister is that shortly, we agitate as convocation for an incorporation of entrepreneurship to the schools which is not provided, like health science and science, because we want to be compatible to the labor market since there is unemployment in this country. If I finish and I become a doctor, I have a medical center and I have 2 medical centers, I can hire other doctors and therefore contribute meaningfully to the employment of graduates. We also agitate for the incorporation of graduates to the economy of the university. When there's business in the university, we must incorporate alumni, because those are the people whom we can dictate that 2.5% must go to the student fees, so that at the end of the day, we preserve these prestigious walls of this university from being bent and from vandalism. So with those few words, I would love to actually acknowledge the presence of Professor Dlover as the Dean of Medical School. There's a lot of significant things that we have achieved. The first one is the recognition of the convocation, which is led by a medical doctor who graduated in this very, very prestigious campus. So, firstly, there are few things, just few things. I will be very short. There's a gym that is on the pipeline at medical school. There's a fund that has been created by Professor Dlover to deal with the students that are experiencing financial disability. Her vested interest on the alumni programs, especially like this one, is one of the significant things that she did. The one that I love is the one of the retirement spaces that are being created at medical school, so that the very same professors that we say they must impact knowledge to our students and young doctors have a platform to do so. So I would love to thank you, Prof, for that. And also, I'll be naive if I don't mention these 3 people, young people. Bato William Buyane, Siyabonga from the office of the Dean, Zintle Kwela, Siyabonga, and then the last one is Manga Kuzwayo. Thank you, we love you. When we have fundraising dinners and breakfast, I would love to see these faces. Thank you.
Prof, I'm very sorry. This is very unusual, because vote of thanks have been done, but I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight if I don't say this, because it's very important that we impart this knowledge. The statement about retiring, I think, is very dangerous, I must say. Yes, because it can't just be ageism. Let me tell you, and I'm telling you with a very clear conscience, South Africa had only 8 medical schools for a population of 62. Cuba had 27 medical schools for a population of 11 million. That's why we are sending people there. The last medical school we built was the Walter Sisulu in the Transkei. We have just opened a medical school in the University of Limpopo. I'm the one who fought for that. Believe you me, if we did not send people who have retired there would not have been medical students. All of them were sent by me. All the professors who are, I'm sure you know them, Professor Sam Mokhokong, they are all there. We sent them and said, please get out of retirement. These people need education. So it's not as easy as that. I even went to cabinet and asked, and I'm still fighting that battle, that medical professionals must only retire at 75. I'm asking for that, and I'm fighting that battle. It can't be about dealing with unemployment. Because do you know how long it took to train that man? Do you know how long it took? Just to become a specialist is 13 years. Just to become a specialist. from the time you spend first year 13 years. Then all of a sudden, because we have reached 60 years, you must leave all that knowledge. And it can work. Professor Mokgokong, who was one of the most known gynecologists here who went to start Medunsa, is 81. He's still working in the private sector. Still consulting, but the public sector has lost him. You know, in terms of years, in terms of human development index, how does that help? I'm one of the people who reprimanded the new president of the ANC Youth League, who has just been appointed because we spent a long time in my organization without having Youth League. He promised young people that because he has taken over, he's going to send them to parliament and get rid of all the old people. I called him, I said, look, young people are unemployed. You promised them 400 posts held by what you call old people. 400. Do you know how many millions of young people are unemployed? What you should be doing is they must become scientists, computer specialists, IT specialists, and all that, and not fight for positions in government. I just want to make that not for my own defense, because I don't need to stay in government, by the way. I don't need to. I can go and work anywhere, anytime. My practice is still waiting there. I can go and study it. Nothing will stop me. But I just want the young people in this country, in fighting unemployment, not to become sore and look at old people and say, this one is taking my job. It's not like that. And if all the old people go, believe you me, this country will collapse tomorrow. If I remove all those people, Prof. Risenga, who were studying here, if I remove them from University of Limpopo because of age, we close that medical school immediately. We'll close it. There will be no, this year they are going to graduate the third group. We'll close it tomorrow if they all go. I just thought it's important to say that.
Thanks, Dr. Msolidi. You know, these people are young. We still need to guide them. So thank you for those words of wisdom. We give them the platform to share, but then we also sort of put them back online. So I think you did that well. So colleagues, without further ado, thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for coming here, our DVC, our amazing guests here, our audiovisual people, our caterer, Welile, and my children. I call them my children, my medical students, and of course, Bato, Zintle, and Kwezi for really assisting. And it takes a lot to arrange this. Sometimes, especially with the minister, they are busy. We don't know whether they're coming or not. So thank you so much. And of course, my colleagues who are right there, the professors and heads of departments, for making time. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again next year when we honor the next group of our living legends. Thank you. And thanks, Nongebo. Of course, how could I forget? Yes, our MC. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, colleagues.